Here on Hot Media, we talk about the hottest controversies and the hottest content in mass media. I'm Bob Mann, and I'm very honored. I'm getting into the show very quickly here today because of the fact that the person who is my guest is under a great deal of pressure. Not the kind of pressure we talk about in America with our daily lives, but the pressure of war. Yuri Matsarsky is a journalist, and he is now a soldier, a freedom fighter in Ukraine. We have talked about Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine, and one of my feelings is that Americans get bored easily, and I'm so concerned that we are going to lose our focus in terms of this war and paying attention to what it means. Yuri, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us here on Hot Media.
Thank you, and interested in our affairs. Thank you so much.
And let's just talk a little bit about the idea of your personal story. Very often, journalists are supposed to be the people who are on the sidelines. They are the objective observers. They try to see two sides in every story, although there aren't always two equal sides to every story, especially this one. What made you decide that the time had come to not be on the outside looking in, but to pick up arms, take action, and change the nature of what you're doing for your country?
I've been a journalist, I've been a reporter for more than 2 decades before the war started. And I was an observer, I was a independent observer, the guy who is standing on the sidelines and watching what is going on. I've been in a lot of really bad places. I worked in Syria, in Iraq, in Gaza Strip, in Central Asia, in Cairo, during Arab Spring, and so on and so on. And when the war started, the very first day of the war I think it was the craziest and the baddest day in my life, the worst day of my life. Because, my personality, it's some kind split in two parts, in two completely different parts. One part is a journalist part. This part was saying to me, "Oh, you should find a way to be useful for your country in your reporter's way. You should try to make some reports, or you should try to make some observing about what's going on in Ukraine, in your country." But my other part of personality, it told me that it's not time and it's not place to be observer, to be a guy who's standing aside and just watching. And that's other part of my personality. Uh, at the end of the first day of the war, this part of my personality won. So I took because I was a war reporter for a long time. Of course, I have my reporter helmet with me. Of course, I have a bulletproof jacket and all the stuff for security in bad places like war zones and so on. So I took my helmet with a big big black helmet with a huge white letters press on it, and I took also my daughter's black marker and I painted, all this white letters press on it, and remade my press helmet, my reporter helmet into a warrior's helmet. And with this helmet, on the second day of the war, I joined the army. I volunteered to join the army on the second day of the war, and I took my helmet with me. And the only thing the military authorities in Kiev, the only thing they gave to me on this second day of the war, it was assault rifle, Kalashnikov rifle, and about 80 ammo for it. So I
Yuri, can
was
I just ask you a quick question
okay.
about the fighting? I think so many of us here in the United States, of course, many people have joined the military. We just had Memorial Day. People have certainly fought, but we haven't really fought since the 1860s on our own territory. What is combat like? I know you look like a pretty tough guy, and you've been a war correspondent being in the middle of it. So the whizzing of bullets, the explosion of rockets is not something new to you. But what is it like to be in a life and death situation, a kill or be killed situation, especially against such an overwhelming force that is trained and sent in to wipe you out?
Because the front is so wide, because a lot of regions is under occupation, because in a lot of regions the fighting is going on, mm, almost every day or directly every day. So the picture of the war is different. So you can be in one part of, for example, Donetsk region. I've been in I was in the one brigade in Donetsk region, who was fighting, in some kind of flat lands. It was only fields, even the forest and even trees were really rare in this place. And it was from from afar. It looks like a Second World War movie. You know, everything is burning. All the things you can hear, it's blasts, and you can see tanks which is riding through the fields. You can see guys who are running behind these tanks. The only differences between this situation and the Second World War movies, it's helicopters, which is also flying in the skies. But 20 or maybe 40, mm, 40 miles from this place in the same Donetsk region, the picture is completely different, not the same at all. Because the guys, the Ukrainian soldiers, they are managed to dig long, deep trenches. So, and we are living in these trenches for weeks, and we are fighting under constant shelling, under constant artillery shelling. So it looks much more than First World War. It looks like a trench war.
The trench warfare, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, let me ask you this, because this is a media issues podcast and you are a journalist. Do you get any opportunity to get a sense of what the coverage is like here in the West, in the USA, in Western Europe? Do you have any means of seeing this to know how well the coverage is going, or if it's incomplete?
It depends. I've worked with a lot of medias from United States, from Germany, from Arabic countries, from Great Britain, and so on. And at at one moment, I decided that a lot of stories, well, they don't have a lot of some kind of personal insight. We don't have some kind of personal feeling in it. So I started my own podcast, Fighting for Ukraine. Just to make it, to make this war a little bit more personal for my listeners, for people who really want to understand what is going on in the heart and the soul of a guy who became a soldier.
Tell us a little bit more about the podcast and where people can get it. I assume, you always say wherever you get your podcasts. Do you have a good range of platforms, Spotify, Apple, Odyssey, all of the rest? Where can people find it? And what are you publishing when you get onto the podcast?
It started because a friend of mine, um, she's living in United States, and she proposed me to start recording something. I think it was the very last days of the first month of the war. And she wrote me that a lot of people here in the United States were really concerned about what's going on in Ukraine. They really want to help Ukraine people and Ukrainian people, but we don't have a whole picture about it. Maybe you should try to make some new insights. Maybe you should try to make some new views on the situation inside Ukraine. So I started with English language podcast. Today it was 60 episodes was published. Its name is Ku Klux Putin. At first it was daily podcast, but now I can't do it on a daily basis. I do it once 2 or 3 days. It's short stories from 3 to 5 minutes about my own feelings, about what I see, about what I hear, about my daughter who became refugee, about my parents who are also refugees now, about my comrades. Some of them are already killed by Russian strikes. Some of them are already wounded by Russian strikes. I think you can find it almost anywhere. I can tell you one thing. I was a radio anchor before the war.
Hmm.
I have had my own daily radio show on the national Ukrainian radio station. But I wasn't before the war. I wasn't, deep into podcast fan. So, but for sure you can find my podcast. Just type in Google "Fighting for Ukraine" podcast. I think the first thing, or one of the first thing, will be Yuri Matsarsky and his experience in this war.
I don't know how well you can see that as I hold it up to the webcam. That is what you have on Spotify. So there it is
Yeah.
right there. So, I'm certain it's on other platforms, but at the very least, we can say Spotify. And we're, of course, also on YouTube, but we're on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Odyssey, and all the rest. So let's talk a little bit about what I said at the very beginning of this interview, which is my fear is that Americans, we tend to get bored with news stories, and we have a lot of domestic news and a lot of issues that come up, and people sadly seem to be as concerned about the price of gas as they are about the slaughter of civilians in a free country, in a democracy. And I was wondering if you have any concern at all, especially knowing as a journalist how fickle the public can be, about the loss of interest day to day in what's going on in your country.
Yeah. I have some kind of fears about the war is becoming more and more routine thing for a lot of people in the West. First of all, in our allied countries, but there is a very, very, very simple exercise. When you are getting mad about gas prices, when you are getting mad about some kind of, economical instability and other things, just remember about, just remember that people are dying ruthlessly under shelling in this unprovoked and unjustified war. And a lot of people, first of all, women, kids, and elderly people, because Russia mostly targeting civilian infrastructure. So all these people will gladly exchange places with you. Will gladly change your places, so we can say to you, okay, we should we can take all your troubles, we can take all your high gas prices, we can take all your economical instability, but you should take our problems, you should take the deaths or loved ones, you should take the occupation, you should take the uh, filtration camps. It looks like more concentration camps than the filtration camps. You should take the mm, uh, rocket fire on your hospitals, on your schools, on your residential areas.
Those are
So
real problems.
yeah, this
In
is very
Ukraine,
important.
those are real
Yeah,
problems. We really, unless of course a military veteran in this country, and some people of course have been the victims of terrorism in our country, but mass shootings, etc. But nonetheless, what you live with is life and death every day. I was going to wrap up by asking you what is a take home message that you would have for the American people, but I think you may have just given that in the sense of, put yourself in our shoes and remember it. But the media has a responsibility every single day to keep reporting on this. One last thing I do want to ask you, though, in addition to that, because I think you did give that take home message just now, but I would assume that you have met Volodymyr Zelensky. that you have interviewed him? Is this someone you know? And even if you haven't interviewed him, can you give us your take on him and his leadership, which is surprisingly heroic? I mean, he came from entertainment, he came from media, and look what he's done. He's like a general.
No, I never met him in my life because first of all, and my main goal of interest was foreign affairs. I worked in Middle East, in Central Asia, in United States, in Europe, and in our countries and parts of the world. I never met him in my life before. Maybe I'll met him in the future, and I can tell you what I never voted for him. For me, it was some kind of joke when the guy who was a comedian, and it was the type of comedy I don't like it. I don't like
Mm,
this type of comedy.
mm.
I never can I never in my life can watch his program, his TV show from the beginning to the end. uh,
But as
Couple of
president,
minutes. Yeah, it's couple of minutes and I'm done. I said it's not funny at all. I can't hear it, I can see it. Okay, I change the channel. It's better for me to watch Vice News or Discovery, something like that. But I was really surprised by his behavior after the war started. I was really surprised by his manhood and by his I can't say that he's making some kind of really, really important military decisions. Of course, there are other people who are in charge of all the military affairs, um, who are planning the operations, who are commanding people right in the field. But he can give an inspiration for people in the army. He can give an inspiration for people ordinary people who are not fighting. And I think this is the most important thing. He can give an inspiration to provide aid for Ukraine and Ukrainians to the leaders of the free world countries. This is real big deal because without support, without aid from the south, from the western and maybe eastern countries, it it's unimaginable that we can win this war only with the help from our allies, only with the guns, with the tanks, with the armored cars, with all the our armor, all the our weaponry, and all the our military technology.
what can we do as individual citizens? Obviously, President Biden, the Congress, the U.S. military has an obligation and has been meeting it in terms of weaponry and financial aid. But what can an individual citizen in the United States do besides saying, "Oh, gee, that's a shame"? What can
You
we do
know,
that's concrete?
one of my listeners from United States, the person from the United States who are listening to my podcast, he or she wrote to me that after this podcast, he or she decided to write to his or her representative in Washington to not to forget about Ukraine, not to forget about Ukrainian kids, not to forget Ukrainian women, and few other people from who are also listening to my podcast. They are supported these decisions. So if you will write to your representatives, if you will talk about Ukraine, if you will talk about what is going on here with your relatives, with your colleagues, with your bosses, with all the people who are ready to listen to you, it would be a big deal because while you are talking about Ukraine, Ukraine is not forgotten. And while we are not forgotten, we are fighting. We are winning. And if you are stopped to talk if you are stopping to talk about Ukraine, the aid is no more. The war is becoming really, really hard for us. It's already really hard for us. It's already, the Ukraine is bleeding right now. But you should talk about what's going on in our country every day and with everyone who is ready to listen. Your representatives, your colleagues, as I said before.
Thank you very much for taking the time to be with us. And again, let me tell you that while we're going to be publishing tomorrow, you can get all of these episodes. Of course, obviously, things change day to day, but even following an episode earlier on when so many people had no idea that you could win, that you could fight back. The American media was saying at one point in February, well, the Russians should be taking Kyiv within a matter of days. Well, that certainly hasn't happened. But Yuri Matsarsky really is truly on the front lines. Of course, you know that I'm not even asking where you are right now. I don't want to do anything to jeopardize your safety. But I will contact you through Facebook to let you know when this is published. I can't thank you enough, and I hope you stay in touch with us. I wish you safety, and I wish you victory.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. We'll stay in touch.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Yuri, for being here on Hot Media. Bye.
Goodbye.
And that's just an amazing interview, and I am thrilled that Yuri took the time to be here. And for those of you who may be watching us for the first time, I want to point out that Hot Media is a weekly podcast. It's mainly an audio podcast that is on all of the major platforms, as I mentioned during the interview with Yuri. And we also are on YouTube as well with video. You can see him. It is amazing that from a war zone like that you can actually be talking with somebody. And what we do here on this program is we talk about the hottest issues and the hottest controversies and the hottest content in mass media, both journalism and entertainment. I mean, we could be talking to a journalist turned freedom fighter one day, and then the next weekend, we're going to be talking about the Emmy nominations. It's everything that is media. So please join us. And above all, whether it's on audio or whether it's on video, please continue to stay with us and subscribe. And I thank you very much for being part of this process here. These are just some of the ways that you can follow more about it. That's my Twitter handle, @BobMannMedia. For those of you listening, it's BOBMANN Media. And you can find out the most about the podcast, including archives, by going to the website, www.bobmanhotmedia.com. That's it for this episode. I thank you so much for watching, and I certainly hope that you will join us on a regular basis. And we have, of course, it's so easy to say, it's so trite, but our prayers and thoughts with the people of Ukraine. But let's keep them in our thoughts and let the media keep them in their coverage. Thank you very much.